Hi, and welcome to the Data Strategy Gurus podcast. Today we have Phil Husbands with us, the designer of the 4DDX data strategy framework. Phil, what we see very often with our clients is a lot of data chaos. And by the way, welcome to the show again.
Hi, Yves. Great to be here. Thank you.
So yeah, data chaos, coming from your data chaos, not really knowing what you need to do, how you can solve the issues. Either it's on the architecture level, it's on the alignment with the business strategy, but getting that next step, not being the 100% in data excellence, perfect type of company, but moving a step up the level so you can move on and move on and move on step by step. So small increments coming from data chaos into data comfort, as you call it. How can a framework help in establishing that next level of comfort in your data chaos?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Yves. And that situation of data chaos is something I think is still familiar to a lot of organizations. It's, I think, interchangeable with that other phrase that you and I often refer to, data busy, as the opposite of data driven, right? So we think about data busy, lots of effort, lots of energy going into trying to achieve valuable things with data, but not succeeding in doing so, really. So data chaos is kind of another lens on that. And the reason we use that word chaos is simply because that's often what it feels like to organizations, isn't it? Their leadership, and in particular their data leadership, rather than having a situation where data is flowing nicely and sort of seamlessly and with a low degree of friction, flowing seamlessly through the organization. It feels like the opposite, doesn't it? It feels like data's hard work. We often talk about subjectively, of course, what does an organization's relationship with data feel like? Does it feel like a happy, productive relationship? Does data feel like an entity which is behaving in the business and we're happy to have data around? Or does data feel like a bit of a pain in the butt, frankly? Does data always, create a bit of a mess, and data's always something we have to clean up after? And whenever anyone mentions data in the context of projects, people are like, oh God, yeah, how do we address the data challenge here? So, yeah, what does the organization's relationship feel with data? And it can, unfortunately, sometimes feel chaotic. And like you say, Yves, for organizations that would say that's true for them, what they often don't necessarily want to think about, first of all, is data excellence. So the framework 4DDX, that literally stands for four-dimensional data excellence. And we recognize data excellence as a situation where the business is data-driven and has got all its capabilities at the right level of, all its data capabilities at the right level of maturity. That obviously, is the ultimate goal. But we can never draw a roadmap that says we go from zero to everything in one go, which is where the point, as you mentioned, data comfort comes from. What does just our first round of steps look like to just succeed in getting us out of the chaos? Let's get out of the chaos and into a state where we've created a bit of the breathing space around us. We've stopped, frankly, wasting time and energy and investment on things that aren't being productive for us as a business, and therefore we've freed up some space in our budgets and in our productivity to start doing more data-driven and not data-busy things with our data. That's what I mean by data comfort. So, there are a number of steps which I would say are fundamentals in that whole array of data capabilities that 4DDX describes. The question that we're asked often is, that all makes sense, but what do we need to do first, right? What are those essential things that will give me that solid foundation of, being in data comfort and not data chaos? I'm going to pause there for a moment because I've been talking for quite a while. I can start to describe, what that roadmap to get from chaos to comfort looks like. But I'll let you come back in for a moment, Yves.
Yeah. What I heard when you were explaining, we were talking a lot about data and only data as such. So it feels very often a disconnect between the technical part, the IT, and the application. And in fact, the applications and the processes is what creates the data as such. So the disconnect between application part and the data, does the framework help in such a way where it becomes clear what you want to achieve and which type of applications should do what to facilitate the data that needs to be created, and how, if you say we're data busy, that means cleaning up all the time. So if you can understand which type of data, with which quality you want to have, you can put that in the applications and in the rules upfront as well, to anticipate how your data should look like to get to that certain value. Is that somewhere where you align the framework to more enterprise architecture approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So within the operations dimension of 4DDX, one of the things that there is mentioned there as a data capability is a data operating model. And that's something that I'm sure won't be a surprise to anybody listening. You know, there's broad recognition that, yep, data operating model is something that we should have. But a more important question perhaps is, what does an effective data operating model look like? Effectiveness measured in terms of helping the business to be data driven, not data busy. Back to that one again, you know, so data operating model is something that is quite easy to let get out of control. You know, it's if we focus more on our methods around data as a business rather than the value that we're creating from data, that can cause us to be more data busy than data driven. So yes, we have an approach to an operating model which looks at a value chain for data. So the things that we need to do as a business around sourcing data, acquiring data, persisting data in a high quality state in things like data warehouses, data lakes, and then subsequently, of course, using data and then assuring the value of the data, and then we wrap around that all of the things that we need to do to the data, not with the data. So that's data governance, data security, data compliance, and of course, data operations as, you know, background cogs in the machine. So yeah, we talk about data operating model. There's another capability in operations as well, which is the organization structure. So what does a high performance and effective data organization structure look like? What sort of roles do we need to put people with the right skills in, and how do the reporting lines for those roles need to come together in ways that, again, help the organization to be data driven? And that also leans on that principle of understanding the difference between what our business needs to do to its data and what it needs to do with its data. And like you and I have discussed previously, that's a really subtle but hugely important difference. You know, we think about how we operate with data as a business. You know, everything that we do to data, they're things that get data ready to deliver value, but it's only the things that we do with our data that actually deliver the value. And the point behind that is that if we just try and do things with our data, so analyze it and learn from it and, you know, perform data science with it and automate through it and perhaps sell data and data products, if we're just trying to do those things with data, we've got a big problem because we've done nothing to ensure that we're safe from data risks, and we've done nothing to ensure that the data quality is up to the job. All of those kind of things aren't being done. But the flip side of that is if we focus only on what we do to data, which is the situation a lot of businesses find themselves in, and those things are, of course, stuff that I mentioned a moment ago. What we're doing to the data, we're sourcing it, we're acquiring it, we're persisting it in data warehouses and data lakes. We're also applying governance and compliance controls to the data. We're securing the data. These are all things that we're doing to the data. But again, if we only do those things to it, we're never achieving any value. We're just turning the handle on the machine every day, and no value is coming out. So there needs to be a bit of both, doesn't there? There needs to be things that we're doing to the data and we're doing with the data. From an organization structure perspective, what's interesting is that you can see very clear distinctions in the skills and also in some cases the characters of the people that we need on each side of that coin. And some of those roles naturally fit with an IT environment. So we see a lot of the two roles in IT, and then a lot of what we do with data will fit into business roles and under a head of data rather than the head of IT. And there's not a clear defining line there at all. It's a Venn diagram. But being aware of that Venn diagram and understanding how we operate with data and the processes, as you mentioned, and also the roles and the people we put around the data, understanding what's most effective through that lens of what we do to data versus what we do with data is really, really important tool and mindset.
Yeah, the two and the what sounded like IT side or business side. IT being too slow, trying to implement all the regulations, all the compliance, all the architecture needs to be scalable to
Yeah.
go faster, but on the end, putting a brake on everything. And the business, it couldn't go fast enough, so they built their own solutions with very few privacy, security, and compliance in place. So that's where, if you say we have all the aspects in the framework, and that highlights as well which type of organization, which type of culture, which type of roles we need to define, you can better align the two sides. Well, I always hate it in a certain way to say there are two sides, because in the end we're trying to achieve the same type of goal for the organization, and people are more tech savvy, so they're very likely more in the IT organization, and people are less tech savvy, so they're not necessarily in the business, but they understand the business and are less tech savvy. And I think that helps a lot in just giving the insights on how you should align those capabilities from a human perspective to bring the value to the data, if I'm understanding what you're saying on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking back to that roadmap of, chaos to comfort, data excellence, yes, that's the vision, but we'll get there, as soon as we can. But for now, let's go from chaos to comfort. These are absolutely the kind of things that go into that roadmap. Think about a business where its organization structure and its operating model, two things we just talked about, if they're not aligned to the kind of concepts and principles that we've just talked about, then you're going to be more in data chaos. So, take the I suppose this, what I'm about to say, speaks both to operating model and organization structure. Is that thing that you hear mentioned quite often, I think, especially in larger businesses, is people in the business saying, I'm just trying to do this thing with the data. I'm trying to run this report with the data. Or I'm trying to provide this data to one of our customers or suppliers. There's something I'm trying to do with data, and oh my God, it's so difficult. Why is it so difficult? Because the answer why it's so difficult is because we haven't done the things to the data that we need to do. I can't share those data because we haven't checked on the compliance and the governance around that, or I can't analyze these data because the data aren't available, or they aren't in the quality I need them to be in. So, it's about having that balance and not having. And if we haven't got that balance, we're in data chaos. So it goes without saying, doesn't it, that to move from data chaos to data comfort, we need to address those kind of things. So early in the roadmap, the high-level roadmap from chaos to comfort, I'll definitely put things like data use cases. This, again, is something you and I, Yves, have talked about in the past. It is fundamental, isn't it? As a business, having this clear understanding of what the jobs are that we need data to do, that are going to drive the business to achieve its goals. Knowing that is essential, of course, but more than knowing it, we need to record it and then communicate it to other people in a way so that everybody involved knows too. It's no good having that kind of understanding and then siloing it within a small group of people. We need everybody to be on the same page in terms of what data value looks like in real terms and the kind of things that we need to do in order to create that value. So definitely get the data use cases pinned down. Also, relatively early on in that roadmap, I'll be having a look at that organisation structure. Now, organisational structure changes obviously take a lot of time, and there's often things that simply can't be done to move people around roles. But before we think about any changes to the organisation structure, just applying the kind of thinking and principles that you and I have chatted about here, to be aware of what the business organisation structure looks like, and be able to say that, that whole balance between what we do to and with data, we haven't got that balance at the moment. So it's not a surprise to us that there's some things that we can't do with the data. We're not going to waste any time and energy on trying to bang our heads against that wall. We're going to be aware of why we can't do those things and put some, even if it's only short-term measures in place to address those limitations in our data organisation structure. Other things that need to appear fairly early on in that roadmap from data chaos, data comfort, be things like data cataloging, right? So a nice way to think about data cataloging is performing a data stock take. And the principle here is that it's impossible for any business to bring its data under better control if we can't answer basic questions like, what data do we have, where do those data come from, where do they go to, how do they get there, what are they supposed to be for, right? We need to get basic answers to basic questions so we can see our data landscape in a way that enables us to move forwards with clarity and confidence, right? And a key point there in terms of accelerating the roadmap is to not get bogged down too soon in specialist technology. There's lots of great tools for performing data cataloging, isn't there? But if your business is doing pretty much nothing on data cataloging, it's often a bad idea to try and leap straight to using sophisticated tools to catalog your data, because what happens is you just add yet more complexity. You've got another tool in the business that's cost a lot of money, and you need to see the value from it, and then you've got to train a bunch of people on it, and you've added another set of complications. There's a great deal of sort of preliminary or even prototype data cataloging that can be done using tools that every organization already has. So inventorizing your data in simple spreadsheets. I know spreadsheets is often a dirty word, but it works at that level, right? So inventorizing your data in spreadsheets, producing enterprise level conceptual data models, which we like to call simply data relationship diagrams, just literally creating a map of what are all of the different people, processes and technology that act as stepping stones for data as it moves through the business, and where are they connected and where are they not. So data cataloging is something that I would definitely put at the front of that roadmap from data chaos to data comfort. Being aware at least of the strengths and the weaknesses in your data organization structure and ways to quickly address any issues you might have there. These are things that I would put in the early stages of that roadmap. There's others, but again, I'm going to let you come back in for a moment.
Yeah, it's about the trust of your data, knowing where to find it, and understanding it. What struck to my mind is really understanding what you're trying to achieve and have that documented in such a way. And I was thinking alongside when you were talking about roles, what I very often see if they're asking for data scientists, data architects, the technical roles related to data, it's in a certain way, do you know SQL? Do you know Python? Do you know how to build a data model? But there is nowhere the business side involved in it. What do you want me as a data architect to come and do in your company? What do you want me to achieve and help you out? And that's never defined in a job description, where I think, why do I go to a company to help them? Because I'm interested in the business and optimize the business in such a way with all the experience, what you have overcome all pitfalls, what might happen as such. And I think that's an important part that you say, this is what we're trying to define and explain on what you want to achieve, but you don't only do it at the business level, but you involve the people from the technical part in that same journey. And that's the roadmap, not just only the steps, but explaining why do we take these steps to achieve what in such a way. It's like the child is always asking why, and it's because it's like that. And that doesn't really help on building their critical thinking or the rationale on helping evolve, because they maybe can contribute something that you are not aware of, or they have different type of capabilities that can help in building that real value chain as such.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that value chain mindset, I think, is super important, not just at a sort of operational or outputs level, but all the way up into data strategy. And because it's a very common example, isn't it? You touched on it there with data science, right? A common situation where there's an imbalance in that equation, if you like, of all the things we need to do to data and then what we can do with data. That imbalance is seen in data science a lot, isn't it? And it's almost become a bit of a parody for how organizations can kind of get this wrong, isn't it? Okay, we're going to recruit a data scientist or scientists, and we're going to sit them in the business and then all stand back, anticipating, right? They give them a minute, and they're going to dazzle us with insights, answers to questions we didn't even think to answer yet. And what actually comes back from the data scientist is, where's the data? What data have I got to work with? And if we haven't got basic capabilities like a data catalog or data quality standards, supporting data governance, which attains and maintains the right level of data quality, and there's loads of other things. If we're not doing those things to the data, then that creates a situation which is so familiar to many people, maybe listening now, which is, well, our data scientists actually can't do much, and what our data scientist ends up doing initially is data governance and data modeling and these kind of things. The key to avoiding that is having a clear understanding and a clear view of what is that value chain, not just at a local level, but at a global level in the business. And in these sort of examples, it starts with the kind of things we mentioned earlier on, understanding what data is available to the business and what data the business needs. And if data that can benefit the business isn't available to the business, having a look at how we can close that gap, either by making changes in business processes to record more useful data or connecting with other third parties that can supply us the data that we need. And then, so that's sourcing the data, and then, as I mentioned earlier on, acquiring the data. How do we acquire the data and then start to apply those business rules to it to transform it in ways that get it ready to do the things that we need it to do? Yeah, so there needs to be that more global understanding of the value chains for data in the organization. Again, this is something that when that understanding doesn't exist, we can end up in data chaos. I think, what we just described there, the example of the data scientist, that, could easily, I think, agree that, well, that feels chaotic. So to avoid that, and get into a state where we're more in data comfort than data chaos. We need to sort of surface the kind of topics that we're talking about now, not do what can happen quite often, which is, well, let's appoint the data scientist and then IT will sort that out. Yes, it's probably a case where we're not quite ready for a data scientist, but let's get one, and then let's we'll give IT the problem of feeding them the data that they need.
Yeah, it sounds so familiar, having access to the data. Sometimes if you land at a new client, it takes only a week to get access to your email, just to start communicating simple things. But the same goes along with having access to your data or having access to systems. It's still a burden to get to that in a compliant way. I fully understand, and I've seen various approaches where they say there are only 3 people accessing the data, so we can give them all access because it's very, very closed in such a way. So there is no risk on having that data go out or not being compliant in such a way. But still, it's not by design that there is being taken care of. So already I feel a bit more comfortable by having the framework next to me, where you can address all these issues and just visualize it on where you need to focus to get in that comfort zone from your data chaos and getting that organized and just taking little steps in really becoming data excellent as such, Phil.
Yeah. I think that's one way that we really like to see 4DDX being used, and there's a number of organizations using it in exactly that way right now. Whilst it can be used and is often used to devise and document data strategy and run enterprise data capability and maturity assessments and build data capability roadmaps and all those kind of things, sometimes, it's just used in this capacity of understanding what the bigger picture looks like for given scenarios. And if we continue to use the data science scenario, it's about recognizing that in that first dimension, data value, well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about data science. The value that we're looking for is data telling us stories and giving us insights to things that we didn't previously see, right? Answering questions that we haven't thought to ask yet, that sort of stuff. So that's the value that we're looking for. Second dimension in data compliance, as again, you and I have talked about in the past, how do we make sure that we're safe? Yes, we see the value, but what are the risks in delivering that value? We're going to be, perhaps the obvious example is, do we think that there's a chance that we're going to be using personally identifiable information, and therefore we need to make sure that we're compliant in the way that we're doing that? So recognizing that, and then subsequently recognizing in the third dimension, data governance. There's a bunch of things that we're going to need to do to the data to put them in the right level of quality and keep them in that, attain and maintain the right level of data quality. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to deliver the value again. And then finally, that fourth dimension, data operations. There's going to be some things that we're going to need to make sure, some cogs that we're going to need to make sure exist in the machine, and we want to keep those cogs well oiled. So any scenario, any data use case, that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? Any data use case that a business can look at is definitely beneficial, even if you're not sort of going into the depths of 4DDX. If you're just staying at that very top layer, just the 4 dimensions, always ask those questions. What does the data value look like that we're aiming to achieve? What's the picture on data compliance? What's the picture on data governance? And what are the operations that need to exist behind that? But just being aware of that, and if there are gaps, being aware of those gaps before doing something like putting a data scientist in role is definitely a way to move more towards data comfort and away from data chaos.
Yeah, and moving from the complexity to the simplicity, where you say we we start focusing on the 4 dimensions if you have that top of mind and know, okay, we need to take care of the operational side, the compliance side, the value, and the governance side, then we're in pretty good shape, and then you can deep dive in wherever what is needed at which level of your data journey, the complete roadmap as such. Very nice takeaways, Phil. I don't know if you have any words to add or some approaches that people can apply to wrap up this episode of the Data Strategy Gurus podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Yves. So, a couple of things, I guess, just to mention where people can find 4DDX. So that's very simply just at 4ddx.app. If you go to that address, it'll open 4DDX in Miro for you. And because it's in Miro, not only the framework, but all of the supporting materials and links to other resources are there too. So go and have a look at 4ddx.app. There's also an online guide for data strategy, and that's just simply at datastrategy.how. I'd encourage people to go and have a look at that one. And then I think just a final piece of advice, really, again, just focusing on that early stage roadmap from data chaos to data comfort. Another key principle is, two actually, I'm going to give two. So one is don't reinvent the wheel. So when we think about things like data governance, common question that I'm asked is, okay, I understand that we want to keep things simple, simplify and accelerate. We're not trying to reach excellence yet, but Phil, we've found that we've got a data quality problem here. We need to start doing a little bit of data governance, but data governance feels like an all or nothing thing. How can we just get started with data governance? And the key thing there, and this applies to data cataloging as well, is don't reinvent the wheel. Right, so it's a common phrase, I know, but it's absolutely true here. The data governance and all these kind of capabilities at a basic level, they are not unique enough, and in some cases are not unique at all across different businesses and even across different industry sectors to justify having to create, for example, with data governance, create data governance policies from scratch, right? There's lots of examples of data governance policies out there, and if one's good enough for now, use that one, right? So don't reinvent the wheel. The other key recommendation is, again, something I think I mentioned earlier on, is do the best you can with what you've already got. And I mentioned this in terms of data cataloging, didn't I? Don't invest too soon and create speed bumps and create cost barriers to entry for these basic capabilities. You can do that data stock take in simple data modeling tools like Visio or Miro, again, Lucidchart, and just inventorize in the spreadsheet and just, get up off the blocks and start walking or even jogging in those kind of ways. So 4ddx.app, datastrategy.how, don't reinvent any wheels and do the best you can with what you've already got.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks very much for your time. Really enjoyed this chat again about coming from the chaos into the comfort, and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks very much, Yves. Thanks for having me.